Salute, family. My name is Yello Does It, aka No W, aka Yes, my name's The Color, and I just finished watching Lovecraft Country, fam, and now I gotta talk about why it was so disappointing. The first two episodes of Lovecraft Country were damn near perfect, fam, and going into them, I was concerned. Because this was HBO's second foray into this new subgenre of sci-fi fantasy where the supernatural is interwoven into these historically black American experiences and themes. I was worried that Lovecraft Country was going to end up being a copy and paste kind of paint by numbers clone of the Watchmen series that HBO did, which was incredible, by the way. Go watch that. Except adding Lovecraftian elements instead of superhero elements. But they didn't, or at least those first two episodes made me feel like they did not do that, and it felt good, barring some minor issues that I had with the show being written for the lowest common denominator in some cases, which I understand why you got to do that. A lot of people, you want mass appeal. Some people are dumb. You have to do that kind of thing. And I'm not taking any points away from that, but it did kind of decrease some of my enjoyment because it felt like they were constantly expositing things to me while I was also watching them happen already. But aside from that, those first two episodes are almost perfect. I greatly appreciate the world that they started to set up for me. And it seemed like they were not going to stick to any kind of conventional storytelling methods, which is fine, especially for TV, fam, because TV has a tendency to just rely on the setup and payoff technique. They say or do something early that ends up later being super relevant and you barely even notice it. It's like a cheap way to foreshadow, but we often see it in TV, and that kind of thing is the reason why the end of Game of Thrones was so unsatiating for so many people, because in Game of Thrones they set up a world and they didn't really reveal to us what the rules of the world is, but they constantly showed us that they were not your protagonist is going to do well no matter what kind of rules. The world will punish you for thinking that you can just go out here and do the right thing. It's the reason why we watched, obviously, it's the reason why we watched Ned Stark lose his head, but it's also the reason why after that we watched Robb Stark plan for so long his ascension to the throne only to have the Red Wedding. But then later in the series, Jon Snow should have died 27 times, and it became clear to us that the rules that were set up in the world didn't matter anymore. I'm not disappointed in Lovecraft Country because it told a different story than I was expecting. Tell the story you want to tell. You understand what I'm saying here? Tell the story the way you want to tell it. But this show made promises. In those first two episodes, it set itself up as this stereotype dismantling meta commentary on Lovecraft's literary contributions versus his own rancorous racism by making black people the heroes of a Lovecraftian story, only to then all too often fall victim to those same stereotypes, the same kind of tropes that we've seen throughout history, throughout television and movies, repeated. The same kind of mismanagement of character motivations and all of this stuff, repeated. I don't think that Misha Green and everyone else involved with creating the show was out to destroy its own premise. I just think that it was mishandled and the show suffered because of it. Often throughout the series, Lovecraft Country would go on these thematic field trips where the show would take on an anthology kind of feel, but then, spend 3 minutes at the end of every episode giving us a little bit more of that original plot that was set up by the first two episodes. You know what I'm saying? That overarching season plot, which it had the thematic field trips been executed better, I think would have been much more enjoyable, but they didn't really, in my opinion, commit. For instance, the third episode is when I first started to notice that I don't know if this show is gonna be able to live up to what it set up in the first two episodes. I'm not even gonna lie, at the end of the second episode, I was like, I don't know how this show is gonna live up to what it's setting up here. I remember saying it, but I was excited about moving into the rest of the episodes, and then the third episode came and it was a haunted House episode, and I was like, it was the American Horror Story episode, and I just didn't think that it was handled very well. Not only was it not spooky in any kind of real way, but also the racial overtone of it, where there's a scientist who is experimenting on black bodies, because obviously black bodies don't matter as much as white bodies, so they can do whatever they want. They can use all kinds of magic and science to do whatever, because, you know, black people don't experience pain the same way, which we often see problems with still today as far as the black experience in medicine is concerned, right? So valid point being made here. However, there was a lady in there who was a slave who a doctor used to experiment on without using anesthesia, right? This is real life stuff, without using anesthesia, and he was the guy who made the most advancements that we saw in like gynecology that people still use today. One of the women in the show, one of the ghosts, her name was Anarcha, and that is the name of the woman who the real life doctor did the experiments on. It just didn't really hit home. They didn't spend enough time developing that. It just felt like a thematic field trip. It makes the woman who was a real slave, a real person who was really experimented on, feel kind of overlooked. much in the same way that, like, we never learned about any of these things in history class. And in my opinion, they did the same thing with the Emmett Till episode. And as timeless as that story feels, as timeless as that story feels, because as black people, the shit has not been changing. We've been dealing with the same fuck shit since the last ever. As timeless and timely as that story feels, it was loosely tied into the episode. You know, and then what else happened later in that episode? Oh, I hate being black so much, Ruby says. Oh, it's so hard to be black that I just want to be white for a little while and fuck a white man. I just think that if you're gonna name drop an event like Emmett Till, you have to make it feel impactful and important. Now, Diana being friends with Emmett Till does lead her, and her dealing with that grief does kind of lead her into a very interesting story. I mean, that episode is a very good episode. The Bobo episode, where Diana kind of deals with the racism directly. The same kind of racism that Emmett Till had to deal with. She deals with it in the same way, except there's magic involved now. I thought that was really good. But we got away from Emmett Till so quickly that it just felt like, why did we bring it up? And that doesn't mean don't bring it up. Guys, talk about it. We must, obviously. But add something to it. Make it matter to the story in a way that can never be taken away, that it can't be edited out. And then they did it again in Tulsa. Now, here's where Lovecraft Country cemented its second place status in this new supernatural slash black American historical themed genre that has been created lately. This is where it's like it's underneath Watchmen, definitely, because of the way that it handled Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was like a backdrop. The massacre of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, is such an iconic and important event in Black history. One of many times that these kind of terroristic attacks were committed against Black economic growth. You can't just make it a backdrop for you to tell your story and expect it not to feel lackluster and expect it not to feel like you're only trying to capitalize off of these events. The show just seems to use historically Black moments and themes as a way to kind of appear woke, to appear as though there's some commentary happening here. But it's essentially only using it for the dramatic effect. It's just more Black trauma being thrown in your face and not cleverly or even interestingly used in any way to push the narrative forward. And I don't like it. It's unfulfilling. You can't just make it a backdrop for certain characters to kind of grow. Characters who thus far have only ever done the wrong thing. Specifically Montrose. Now listen. Be homosexual, be gay, be queer, be all of the things that you have to be in your life. Luckily, we live in a time now that's way more accepted. And Montrose lived in a time, fictionally speaking, well, factually speaking, but Montrose is a fictional character, where it was way harder. Like, way harder. But Montrose literally killed another, I guess, analogously queer character for seemingly no reason in cold blood. A moment that Misha Green herself actually admitted. She actually said it herself that she could have done this better. She says, where does she say it? God damn it, where can I find it? Boom. She says here, Misha Green says, I wanted to, matter of fact, hold on. Right here. I wanted to show the uncomfortable truth that oppressed folks can also be oppressors, but I didn't examine or unpack the moment/portrayal of Yahima as thoroughly as I should have. It's a story point worth making, but I failed in the way I chose to make it. She's saying here that she did not handle it the way that it deserved to be handled. And I'm seeing that as a theme, as a recurring issue throughout this season. With the thematic field trips, with some of the character motivation stuff, and the narrative plot, the main overarching seasonal plot itself. All of these things were mismanaged. But here's the thing about Montrose, as incredible an actor that Michael K. Williams is, and he's always playing gay folks for whatever reason, and as important as it is to tell these black queer stories, to tell these black LGBT stories, because black folks, guess what? We still got a lot of work we got to do in that area. We're not the only ones. There's a lot of bad people out there, but we got a lot of growing we got to do. You got to do it and make it feel like it matters and make it feel full and complete. You gotta execute it well. You can't just say, hey, Montrose is tortured, so he does bad things. Hey, Montrose is gay, so he's tortured. Hey, Montrose is doing bad things because he made a terrible mistake when he was young and he didn't stand up for the love that he knew he was experiencing. So we gotta go back to Tulsa and give him the opportunity to grow as a character off screen. Montrose didn't actually do anything. He just kind of was, especially back in Tulsa. But incredible performance. Michael K is a monster in this acting streets. And listen, I'm nobody's like experienced professional on LGBT rights and struggles and experiences. But with Ruby, with Letty's sister, she was, I guess in a way, contending with some LGBT stuff, with some like lesbian stuff, but I don't even know if that's necessarily true because her experience was kind of always with like a dude up until that one kiss at the in the finale episode, which led to what? Her being killed off screen by the evil white woman who was supposed to have been coming around because she's feeling things. I don't know. It just was messy. And reducing Ruby, who had one of the best episodes of the season, her body horror episode where she hops in and out of white skin through this like painful transforming process. And all the while exploring the racism, exploring the racial elements, and exploring the cost of magic, which is a quintessential Lovecraftian theme, right? Very well balanced, I think. It lasted a little long, but I think it was handled really well, especially at the end where she shoved her stiletto into that evil racist white manager's buttocks and then stood over him as a big black woman drenched in blood and viscera, and just said, I just wanted you to know who did this to you. Reducing Ruby, who had all of this character development during that entire process, reducing her down to an off-screen death by the evil white woman who she starts to develop feelings for, only to have a not very surprising reveal, because guess who's using Ruby's body to trick everybody? Christina, who pretty much uses bodies to trick people constantly throughout the series. Not only does it waste Ruby's character development, but it also has the unintentional effect of perpetuating pop culture's most irresponsible habit with regards to black folks, and that's saying that the only black women that matter are the light-skinned ones. I don't know if you guys realized this while you were watching it, but Ruby died off screen. And what we ended up having was a dark skin versus light skin fight, cat fight, which was kind of entertaining, but ultimately, in my opinion, is just irresponsible. Just a mishandling of the very themes and stereotypes that you're supposed to be dismantling. By the time we got to the Korea episode, I believe that was episode 6, I had already recognized that this was going to be a setup and payoff kind of series. So I resigned to it. It was interesting enough to keep me watching. So when we went to Korea on this thematic field trip, which I'm not entirely sure what the theme really was, but it's a Korean mythology that we're going into that Atticus just happens to be around for. This lady, this nice, beautiful lady played by Jamie Chung Ji-ah, is running around having all kinds of sexual relations with all kinds of dudes and devouring their souls and eviscerating their bodies when they climax. Visually speaking, stimulating, interesting even. Like, as the thematic field trip goes, probably my favorite. But the point of it was lost on me. I knew that it was going to pay off at the end. She's a monster. They're facing people who have magic powers and monsters, right? That was the idea there. So I knew she was going to play an important role. I thought she was going to play a big role. Apparently, she's literally just the Chinese finger trap that if Atticus is the one finger and Christina is the other finger, she's the thing that keeps them together so that whatever the spell is that they did not explain beforehand that they're trying to do can be accomplished. But it was just such an anticlimactic event that it completely ruined the entire Korean lady storyline. But I guess, I mean, obviously there are great things about it. I love Diana's 2 episodes, right? The one Emmett Till episode, which I do have some issues with, but Diana's part of it I absolutely love, and she's being chased around by the little demon Negro girls, you know what I'm saying? The stereotypes being dismantled, perfectly handled in that instance. And the Hippolyta, her space-time theme field trip where she just gets to go off and have all these different lives and have all these different experiences, which it was a fascinating episode to watch, but I had no idea what the point of that was going to be. And then the payoff on that was also trash, because all of it was essentially just so that she can be the GPS, the time travel TomTom, the Google Maps for time travel, in the time travel episode where they have to go back to Tulsa, Oklahoma. So she's literally just hooked up to a machine, the techno magic machine that allows them to travel through time for the entire episode, floating in the air, making weird like body movements and faces the entire time. It's just not very interesting payoffs for these setups. It's a recurring problem. The spell that they're trying to accomplish here, the Atticus and the gang are trying to accomplish, turns out to be stripping white folks of their access to magic. So the ultimate goal is for every black character to become the magical Negro. Now, the good part is that it's not in servitude to the white characters, which helps me digest it better, but it's still just the magical Negro. And then Diana ends up with a metal arm, a mechanical arm that she uses to choke. She like crushes Christina's throat at the end. Just murders her. Ruby earlier early in the series, shoves the stiletto up the white man's buttock. What else happens here? There's a lot of, Atticus beats the racist white folks with bats and does all of it's like all of the answers to the racism and stuff is just like violence. It's like, hey, they were violent against you, be violent against them. Now, I'm not one to be out here talking about nonviolent. I'm not saying that. And in these instances, most of these people were defending themselves or defending someone else. Christina was done. There was no reason for Diana to crush her windpipe. It wasn't Christina's fault that Diana was cursed and lost her arm because of it, but got a new magic metal arm. It wasn't Christina's fault that happened. What was the point? I just didn't feel like there was any point. And that's something that happened like over and over again. The payoffs to the setups just didn't really pay off. With all of that said, obviously, ultimately, Lovecraft Country is disappointing, but it's still a fun show to watch. It's still very visually stimulating and pleasing. HBO did not, there's some moments where the CGI was a little like, but HBO, it seemed, did not spare the expense. They were like, here, have the money, make this show. And it's entertaining, man, and the performances are amazing. There is something about Journey Smollett-Bell's voice when she gets to like growling and you would not, and they start speaking that other language. I was all the way sucked in. Atticus too, man. Jonathan Majors is amazing. I look forward to watching him be Kang. Obviously, Michael K. Williams is absolutely amazing. Wunmi Masaku, who played Ruby, man, she's absolutely like incredible. I mean, Jada Harris, who plays Diana, absolutely incredible. I mean, all of these performances were amazing. Amazing. It is not any of the actors and actresses' faults that this show just doesn't quite pay off in the way that it promised that it would. That is a purely script and showrunner problem. I think that the show is good enough that people are going to be able to come out and say that was incredible, and because of that, I will see these actors again later, and that is a plus. With that said, fam, you know me, I'm Yellow Does It. Please like, subscribe, comment down below whether you agree or disagree. Tell me why you think I'm wrong. Tell me why you think, ooh, that's an interesting point that you just made. With that said, the only thing that I ever want you to take away for the time that we have together, the most important thing that I want you to leave my videos with, aside from this high quality content, is peace.